Hello friends, welcome once again to my YouTube channel. Today topic of our discussion is Software Requirement Specification or SRS. SRS is a detailed description of a software system to be developed with its functional and non-functional requirements. The SRS is developed based the agreement between customer and contractors. The software requirement specification document consistent of all the necessary requirements required for project development. To develop the software system, we should have clear understanding of software system. To achieve this, we need to continuous communication with customers to gather all the information like requirements, need or benefits of SRS. First one is SRS serves as an agreement between a developer and a client. An SRS may be produced as an evidence in the court in case both the parties disagree on the software. It is a written evidence. Second one is requirements keep on changing with environment. With the passes of time, the needs and requirements of the client keep on changing, and at the final stage, when the software is ready, the client may disagree with the final product. In such cases, again SRS is considered as a valid proof. Next is SRS bridges communication gap between developer and client. SRS work as a bridge between communication gap between developer and client. Client are sometimes not able to understand the problem in the existing software, and as a consequence they are unable to specify what they want from the new software. SRS is written in simple English so that developer can explain to client that the final product will be same as they wish to have. SRS helps the client to understand their own needs. Next one is an SRS provides a reference for validation of the final product. SRS helps the client to determine if the software meets the requirements. Without a proper SRS, there is no way a client can determine if the software being delivered is what was ordered. Next is a high quality SRS leads to high quality software. If everything mentioned in the SRS is satisfactory to the client and the developer builds the software by keeping in mind the requirements written in SRS, the final software will be of high quality. Last is a high quality SRS reduces problem of change and rework. If SRS is the starting point in the development of a SRS, the chance of error can be reduced. Characteristics of SRS. First one is completeness. The SRS should include significant requirement whether related to functionality, performance, design constraints, attributes or external interfaces. Second is correctness. In SRS, there should be correct what users want requirements, because incorrect set of requirement cannot satisfy the customer needs. Unambiguous. An SRS is said to be unambiguous if all statement written in this interprets same meaning to different peoples. Next is consistent. An SRS is said to be consistent if there are no conflict between different requirements. Next is modifiable. SRS should be modifiable if and only if its structure and style are such that any changes to the requirement can be made easily, completely, and consistently while retaining the structure and style. Next is traceable. The SRS is traceable if origin of each of the requirements is clear. Traceable is of two types. First one is backward traceability and second is forward traceability. In backward traceability, this depends upon each requirement explicitly referencing its source in earlier documents. In forward traceability, this depends upon each element in SRS having a unique name or reference number. Next is verifiable. A requirement is verifiable if and only if there exists some finite cost-effective process with which a person or machine can check that the software meets the requirements. Next is valid. A valid SRS is that whether all parties related to the project can understand and accept it. Last is ranked according to importance. All the requirements are necessary for the SRS, but some are core or important requirements which should be concentrated first. That's why ranking is required in SRS. According to rank, important or necessary requirements are ranked. Next is components of SRS. First one is functional requirements. The functional requirement for a system describe the functionality of the system. It specifies how the said output can be produced from the given input. A detailed description of all data inputs, their source and unit of measure, all the operations to be performed on input data to obtain the output. Next is performance requirements. How the system perform in case of normal or abnormal conditions must be specified. It can be divided into two parts. First one is static requirements. Next is dynamic requirements. In case of static requirements, there are requirements that specify the capacity of a system, like number of terminals to be used, number of users to be supported, number of documents and their type and size are used. That's why it is also called capacity requirements of the system. In case of dynamic requirement specify constraints on the execution behavior of the system, like a response time. A response time is the expected time for the completion of an operation under specified circumstances. Throughput is the expected number of operations that can be performed in a unit time. Next is design constraints. There are a number of constraints or factors that may restrict the choice of a designer, like standard compliances specify the requirement derived from the existing standards, like a report format, data naming, accounting procedures, audit tracing. Next is hardware compliance. A software has to operate on some predetermined existing hardware. Next is reliability and fault tolerance. Fault tolerance requirement can place a major constraint on how the system is to be designed. Next is security constraints. These requirements place restrictions on the use of certain commands, control access to data, provide different kind of access requirements for different people, require the use of passwords and cryptography techniques, and maintain a log of activity in the system. Next is external interface requirements. All the interaction of the system, software, or with people, hardware, and other software should be clearly specified. User interaction is becoming increasingly important and must be given proper attention. An interaction may be menu driven, like window based, or command based, like DOS based. Next is structure or organization of the SRS. First is introduction. It contains purpose, scope, definition, references, document overview. Overall description. It contains product perspective, product functions, user characteristics, journal constraints, assumption and dependencies. Next is specific requirement. It contains functional requirement, performance requirement, design constraint, external interface requirements, software attributes like reliability, portability, security, maintainability. And next is other requirements. Any requirement may not covered under these requirements. Next is SRS validation. Therefore, it is important that the requirement specification contains no error and specifies the client's requirement correctly. The basic objective of the requirement validation activity is to ensure that reflects the actual requirements accurately and clearly. Types of error. First one is omission, inconsistency, incorrect fact, ambiguity. Omission. In this type of error, some user requirement is not included in the SRS. Omission directly affects the external completeness of the SRS. Inconsistency can be due to contradictions within the requirements themselves or due to incompatibility of the started requirement with the actual requirement of the client or with the environment in which the system will operate. Next is incorrect fact. In this type of error, some facts recorded in the SRS are incorrect. Ambiguity. In this type of error, some requirements have multiple meanings. Requirement validation techniques. Requirement validation techniques are very effective to judge the consistency and completeness of the requirements document. Commonly used requirements validation techniques are: first one is requirements reviews or inspections. Another is requirement prototyping. Requirement reviews. During this process, we can detect different sort of bugs at early stages of the software development that can be more expensive at later stages. Steps or phases of requirement reviews are planning. During planning phase, different people are selected, assign them different roles, and also different material are given to them. An inspection is done by a group of people that includes the author of the SRS. Second is overviews. In this phase, the author of the software requirement specification present it for other inspection team members. Next is defect detection. In this phase, all possible defects are detecting from the software requirement specification. Defect collection. A meeting is planned by the moderator. In this phase, some points are very critical. Defect correction. In this phase, correction of defect made by author of the software requirement specification on the base of different feedback sent by different inspection teams or inspector during inspection process. Requirement prototyping. In requirement prototyping, a software prototyping of a proposed system is designed to understand the requirements according to customer needs. There are two types of requirements prototyping. First is evolutionary prototyping and next is throwaway prototyping. Evolutionary prototyping is designed according to the requirements agreements between software engineers and customer. Throwaway prototyping just to understand the customer's needs, and when both software developers and customer agreed over a mutual set of requirement, then discard the prototyping. Thanks.